Hello, and welcome to the Mother Architect podcast, where we explore the cross section of the Venn diagram of creativity, spirituality, and quantum physics. And here, pants are optional, sanity is questionable, and the only rule is don't be a jerk. Admittedly, I break this rule all the time, but you can make of that rule what you will. On today's episode, we have my friend Melinda, who is also a licensed therapist, and she also has autism. And we got together for a cozy, comfy conversation where we talked about autism and being women and neurodivergence and being women. We discuss being autistic women, being neurodivergent women. We discuss regulating our nervous systems in this current political climate. We discuss witchcraft. We discuss many different resources that one might utilize in trying to remain sane in these trying times. And it was really important to me to invite Melinda onto this podcast space, into this sphere of mine that I'm cultivating, because it is important to me that people feel that they have tangible resources to connect with in order to stay sane and regulated. As you enjoy this conversation, I wanted to let you know in advance that as two neurodivergent women talking, there were a lot of pauses for buffering, a lot of ums, and because we're friends, there were also a lot of likes and you know what I means. So I had to edit it down quite a bit just to make it more cohesive and understandable for an outsider, because there is a very nonverbal type of conversational rhythm that I have with my fellow neurodivergent friends, particularly women. So there are a lot of jump cuts. It's very pure to the conversation. I just cut out the fluff, essentially. So keep that in mind when you're watching. I wanted it to be a comfortable space for us to communicate as we naturally communicate. And the raw footage is about twice as long because there is so much buffering and so many looping around a topic multiple times. But the content is true to the conversation, and I personally feel like anyone who's in need of comfort and nurturing for their mind and their nervous system will find that here in this space. So I invite you to share this time with us, and I thank you for doing so. And I just hope it meets you wherever you're at today. Okay, bye. Who are you?
I know.
Who is Melinda?
I'm probably a new face. So yeah, my name is Melinda Miranda. I am a newly AMFT, Associate Mental Health Therapist, Marriage Family Therapist Associate. That means that I can work under the supervision of a licensed marriage family therapist. So I'm gathering my hours so that I can work independently. I got my degree, my master's degree at Cal Lutheran University a long time ago. I also have my bachelor's degree, I'm going backwards, in psychology at Cal Lutheran University. So those are just a little bit of my credentials. My experience and my background, at least in population-wise, tends to be more with people with eating disorders, people with major depression, anxiety, addiction, and then modality-wise, I tend to work with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, compassion-focused therapy, acceptance, and ACT, so acceptance and compassion focus, I believe. Also, in a bit of somatic focus therapy, or somatic based therapy, somatic meaning dealing with the body and regulation. Recently, I've got into more of an interest in IFS, which is internal family systems, and my background in my master's degree with Cal Lutheran University is family systems-based approach. So I like to know how a system works, not just internally, but also externally. So seeing what's going on in our current social climate, I mean, we see the patterns going on and can't help but get a little worried and excited about what's happening. But also I see it happening in my clients, and I use that to aid in their healing and in their treatment. So right now, I really enjoy using IFS and somatic-based therapy in treating current clients that I work with. I'm also currently focused in an interest in neurodivergent individuals.
Yes.
I identify as a self-diagnosed autistic and neurospicy person with ADHD, and that's something, a part of my history that I came across as I found out that I was diagnosed as ADHD in my mid-30s. So that was very much an awakening for me, knowing that I very much struggled throughout my childhood and adulthood. So that's just a little bit of my background. I mean, I have much more lore.
Oh, yeah, and
but
we'll definitely explore a lot of that organically as we go.
Yeah.
One of the things that drew me to you, which is funny, even how we met at church.
Yeah, that's a huge part of my lore.
But we did not connect really at church. We had the briefest, most beautiful interaction over spilled coffee.
We did.
But we never connected in that actual space. You actually came up to me at the coffee shop that we both frequent.
Yeah.
The hub of our studying and communing and creativity. And we started little connection points there. I feel like it was a little guarded because we both knew each other from church.
Yeah.
We had a few guarded interactions where we were testing the waters.
I think we were both guarded due to our deconstructions at the time. And I knew definitely I was guarded due to my current deconstruction and not sure where and who was a safe person in my life at that time. But the interactions I had with you, I just got this real lovely sense from you that this is a person that I could start to at least taking a chance and getting to know. And I remember I got to come over to your place and you had tea with me, and you started to get curious about your neurodivergence. And that's when I was starting to kind of get curious about my neurodivergence also. And the fact that you were opening up to me about that was really this vulnerability that I really respected, which was not something I was used to. Well, for one, it wasn't something that I was used to from people from the church at the time. And also it wasn't a self-awareness that I was used to people from the church coming from at the time either. So I was really blown away by you at that time. So I was really glad that I pursued that friendship.
That's lovely to hear because that's the intention.
Yeah.
And people don't always receive the intention in their whatever the lenses of their perception. So it's nice to hear that the intention was met.
That it was caught.
Yeah, it was caught by the perception. And yeah, the autism journey, for me, this podcast and the TikTok experience that I have been on, this journey of suddenly having an audience to share with, and I don't even like that language, but suddenly connecting with other human beings, it all came about because of going down the autism rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And my life has changed drastically. My community has changed drastically.
Yeah.
And you are a huge part of that community. And you've been a huge part of being a loving, open friend, but also pointing me toward being grounded when I get a little bit too head in the clouds, being grounded and rooted, and pointing me back to being in my body, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
You might notice that we are surrounded with plants, and there's more that you can't see, but we have crystals and candles
and sensory stuff all around us,
essential oils and comfy things and part of why I wanted to invite Melinda into this space to share with all of you beautiful people is because the Mother Architect podcast is curated with neurodivergent individuals in mind. Yeah. And that's what we are. This is who we are. Not only are we neurodivergent, I don't know if it's okay to share this. If not, I can edit
Please
it
go
out.
ahead. No, that's fine.
But we both exist on a different sexuality spectrum than the binary.
I would agree.
And it's been very challenging to find community to connect with that is welcoming of what I call here the intersection of the Venn diagram of spirituality, creativity, and quantum physics. And in this context, we can just say science because Melinda is here to represent science and what the literature and what would you call it, the psychology community would have to say. Because I have a lot of fantastical things to say that come from a place of intuition and spirit. But I also want us to be grounded here in this physical world that we're in and using the wisdom and resources that we have in the physical world to say that we are meeting in the middle of a place where the creativity, the spirituality is the same as what the science is saying.
Yeah.
And I want what I'm saying to meet in the intersectional space of the experience that Melinda comes from and the knowledge that you have.
And I want to say that, and I tried to find some literature that brought some of that research and the experiential evidence that you intuitively bring up, like in your own personal research and in your reading and in your intuitive dialogue that you have with your audience. But really what I've been finding in, at least with like the neurodivergence experience, and then also in kind of like my recent research into IFS, is that the neurodivergent experience is a spiritual experience too. How we're more in tune and how we've been taught in the neurotypical experience to not listen to our intuitiveness, to not listen to our bodies, how we've been desensitized of our bodies and to our outside experience, to the energetic fields that we're around, to the pattern recognitions that we see, to our natural like stimulation that we're already just like overwhelmed by. And then we're kind of gaslit into our interpretations about it. So, I mean, one of the talking points you had brought up to us is that we're in a world that's not necessarily built for us, right?
Yeah, I feel like this is not our home. It wasn't made for us here.
And that's where that's ableism. That's a term that, I mean, usually is meant for disabled individuals that use a wheelchair, that have actual physical disabilities, that need physical accommodations in their workplaces, and that's why we have modified streets and doors and buildings. It's been a catching up for society to modify and accommodate people who are neurodivergent and accommodate the mind the way that we experience the world. So one way when I was thinking of that talking point, and I'm kind of going a bit of on a tangent, is more about like how capitalism, the way we're forced to work an 8-hour day, or it's the expectation. The average neurodivergent can't work at that pace. Yeah. The average neurodivergent is burnt out by capitalism, and that we can't seem to be able to get the degree and be at the middle class pace, be able to make the exact type of money be able to have the bills and the groceries and work at the pace that we're expected to without burning out the way we do. Like burnout is a cycle that comes with neurodivergence. So if we're expected to work at a pace of a neurotypical, but our bodies and our brains are wired differently and we're supposed to learn how to accommodate ourselves, but the world is wired and made for a typical person, yet we're the ones that are being like, no, you need to change.
Yeah.
Then that's where mental health comes in. Then that's when we're shamed. And then that's where depression comes in. And then that's when misdiagnosis comes in.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so like, I'm not going to go into the entirety of my journey, but misdiagnosis after misdiagnosis,
Yes.
and just so many cycles of medication that wasn't necessary when I wasn't the one that's broken. It's just, this is how my mind is.
Yes.
And we, as a society, we worship capitalism.
We do.
And anything that doesn't fit capitalism, we gaslight into being the problem.
Yes.
And I think that's why I wanted you on. That's why I wanted you here, was so that we could talk about that. So that we could talk about, how do we exist in this framework? How do we survive in this framework? And everything that I'm doing is to work towards shifting and changing and rebuilding the framework by way of communication, education, teaching people that there are other ways of being. And I take a massively spiritual path with that.
Yeah.
So in that, I wanted to talk to you about somatic work.
Yeah.
And internal family systems, because you mentioned both of those multiple times.
Yeah.
And maybe let's start with internal family systems, which I did not really learn anything about other than little bits and pieces that you've shared with me here and there until yesterday.
Yeah.
When we crossed paths in our coffee shop. And I watched a video on it, and I'm like, this is exactly what I was shown, in my spiritual woo path by a higher being. A higher being taught me to create a council of self, which is what I've been teaching people to do. So you can go look at that video. I'm not going to go into it right now, but I'd love to have you talk about internal family systems, where you discovered this, and how you incorporate it when working with clients or even just personally.
So IFS has been more of a personal journey, and then I've been taking more of a direct study recently. So IFS was introduced to me while I was doing kind of like a spiritual journey through Carl Jung. And that's kind of the pipeline I got into internal family system. The concept behind it is that we are a system of parts that have been developed over time. So we are one central self, and that self is innate, and we all have one grown within ourselves. As we grow and develop, and as we have life experiences, usually in our childhood, we have, since that self doesn't either protect or show up or is developed enough to handle certain situations, we build parts to show up or protect or save us or cope with different stressors or events that happen in our lives. It's almost like an onion. We have ourself, and then we develop a part, or they would like to say a protector or an exile, or I'm forgetting the third one, but there are three different type of parts. Let me look it up, and then you can edit this out. Exiles, firefighters, and managers. So the exiles are usually young parts. These are usually what are protected. So like if there was like an event that happened, so if you were young and you went through a traumatic event, so this is something that would be a part that is protected. So a manager would then come in, and then that would be like the part that comes in, would help this young exile to deal with a painful event or the shame or the fear or whatever feeling may be coming up. Usually these are all internalized in the body. So it's usually like a feeling. We don't really remember these things. So most of these are, all of these memories, all of these exiles, all these parts tend to be stored into the body. So when we start to acknowledge these parts, they come as sensations usually. And that's where the somatic work tends to come up first. And that's where a lot of the IFS happens to be a lot of meditation and somatic work. The goal is to create a dialogue with your parts, to build a sense of trust with yourself. So the self will eventually become the leader of your parts. So as we grow and develop and as we become adults, these firefighters, these exiles, these parts tend to become or show themselves as destructive. In his book, Richard Schwartz uses examples of people with eating disorders. The bulimic will develop this cycle of binging and purging and has this part that has the shame of a pain that will soothe while going into a binging cycle, and then the fear of having to gain weight, and then they'll purge to relieve themselves of this fear. So this part is trying to self-regulate, but also relieve themselves of this core fear and what it means to them. So if we were to engage with that part, actually understand what that part is trying to like teach and almost like educate before the purge, then we would know, oh, this part is actually trying to help. That's why the book is called No Bad Parts. This part, while it's doing a destructive thing, is trying to communicate. Behavior is a form of communication. In psychology, at least in my personal philosophy, all behavior is a form of communication. So if we look at these parts, despite how destructive the drug abuse, alcoholism, eating disorder, self-harm, these are parts that are trying to communicate. And we need to listen to them and let them know that, for one, the self can start taking charge. We can trust ourselves to take care of ourselves so that we don't need to hurt ourselves anymore, to communicate, to listen. So the part that wants to hurt ourselves, the part that is trying to say, like, I'm in so much pain, please listen to me, is now being heard by ourselves, because we weren't heard when we were a child.
Yeah.
We weren't heard. And that child, that exile, is still there.
Yeah.
And that's where the inner child work comes into play. And that's underneath all that stuff, is probably sitting next to the self, wanting to be talked to. So with the help of a very skilled therapist, we can uncover these different layers and get to maybe that exile who needs to be talked to.
Yeah.
And then we can have a dialogue and start talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, I've been doing with my therapy. I have a very insecure, anxious attachment, and it's impacted my relationships very directly. And I've been wanting to work this out for years and trying to figure it out. And I've been noticing that I had this part of me that was just reaching for these types of relationships for validation and security, and thinking that if I find a relationship, it will give me the security that I have been searching for in my childhood, that gives me the safety that I know will be consistent. And now, once I finally noticed that that was the behavior that I was doing, I was able to reassure myself, like, oh, I need to start reaching for myself. And before, it wasn't natural to do that. But once I started, for one, holding the discomfort of that, I had to feel it in my body. Noticing how
fun.
Terrible feeling. Terrible. It does not feel great.
Yeah.
But like, you have to hold the discomfort. Hold it in your body, noticing that it exists, acknowledge it, and then give yourself the experience that I can show up for myself, so that you can show your part that I am here for myself. And over time, your parts start to trust you. So then you give yourself evidence. Oh, I'm here for myself.
You build new patterns and a new history with yourself.
Yes.
Based on trust and safety, not in shame.
Yes.
And because I really have only the lens of my own experience, and I'm thinking about those who are sharing this space with us as we're talking about this, I want to think about reaching as if I'm reaching to myself 10 years ago. I could have cognitively absorbed this information and not known what to do with it.
Yeah.
So with those who maybe, because of neurodivergence, struggle with the dialogue of opening up to a therapist or even being able to know where to start, because I had wonderful therapists, but it was me. I couldn't really open up in the way to show the things I needed to show to even get a therapist to get me to this place.
Yeah.
Even though cognitively I could understand, intellectually I could understand everything you're talking about. For those that maybe struggle with communication barriers and trust barriers, or for those who might not be able to afford therapy, how could it look to begin to conceptualize internal family systems and to begin to interact with practical, tangible steps? And I have some thoughts to share about that, but I want to hear your experience and perspective first. How can we begin to apply this?
Yeah, I would start literally, because like what I've noticed with some neurodivergence, and this is kind of where this is me jumping from one pipeline to like the end real quick.
Yeah.
Because it leads to chronic illness very quickly.
Chronic illness queen. Yeah.
We're so analytical, we're so cognitively based that we leave our bodies. We could start with the breath. We can start with getting in tune with our bodies. We can start by stimming. We can start with one thing of unmasking.
I'm taking it as permission right now.
It is it literally is permission to unmask, whatever that looks like to you. I give you permission to unmask, and whatever that looks like, because the experience of being especially specifically a neurodivergent woman, is the experience of being forced to mask. So part of IFS for me has been the experience of looking at my parts and accepting my parts. And that also means the parts of me that wasn't allowed to express herself. So one part of me that I've allowed to explore and express is witchcraft.
Woo, that's where I wanted to go.
Witchcraft and meditation and stimming.
Yeah.
And I've integrated all of it. And it's allowed me to explore my body and explore my mind and vibration and get in tune with my body in a way that I had abandoned a long time ago. And it's allowed me to get in tune with my sense of self.
Yes.
So the more I give myself permission to do that, it allows me to trust myself more. And that's what masking has stolen from us. And that's free.
Yeah, witchcraft is free. And because we don't have the full time to like get into that and explore it, my 2 cents on that would be witchcraft is simply
nature worship.
It's interacting with elements that you can touch that are tactile and incorporating your 5 physical senses into a journey where you are in the driver's seat of your mind. You get to create your intentions and practical rituals and habits around your intentions that are so grounding and rooting. You don't even need to believe in the woo-woo part of it.
You don't.
Just having something to show up for. And I'm going to create in the description a list of resources. I'll put in the books that I love, and then I'll ask Melinda for any resources. It could be a YouTube channel, it could be a podcast, it could be a book, so that we can connect you to those if you are interested. If witchcraft is a big no-no for you, I get it. I was there for a long time too.
Yeah. And witchcraft is just an example.
Yes.
And what I'm encouraging neurodivergence to do is to find what unmasking looks like for them. If I was alone in a room by myself and I wasn't afraid of being perceived, what would I be doing? And how would I feel? And how would I move?
It's a scary door to open for so many people.
And that's free. And
that's free.
And like, how would I move? How would I stim? What would I say? Like, how would I imagine? Like, and allow your brain to just freely just imagine. And I know some people have a hard time visualizing, but if you could imagine yourself, allowing yourself to express what that looks like without the expectation or the fear of being perceived by someone else. Because like for so long we go through life wondering, well, what is someone else going to be thinking about this? Or what should I be doing in this moment? How should I be acting? What is expected of me in this moment, in this workplace? Oh my God, work. A workplace. I work as a professional. I mean, like there's so many just like hierarchy and cultural like just expectations just there. And that comes with its own masking and dysregulation and exhaustion right there. But that's why learning how to unmask and engaging in your interests and what gives you life, what I call what fills your cup as a neurodivergent, is so important to keeping you from burning out. Because that's the cycle that we find ourselves in, is we end up masking throughout our lives. And then we either develop chronic illness. For me is chronic dissociation because I disengage from my body, or depression because I lose my sense of self. I lose myself because I'm showing up as someone else for other things and other people.
Ooh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's for most of my life, even like I'm still in the practice of getting out of this. Like I had a little situation with my partner this morning where I'm living as if I'm his body and like reacting as if I am him in a way to solve his problems. I'm so accustomed to masking and being outside of my body. Yeah. It's like I identify myself as other people more than I identify myself as me. Yeah. That's, I think, what you're talking about, and the dissociation and masking. Yeah. It's wild.
We take on the persona of other people as a form of masking to show up. And that is a neurodivergent way of like us. For one, it is a self-protection for us, because like especially as children, like we didn't know how to show up, and that is a very clever way for us to get through the world to protect ourselves when we didn't understand the social cues, when we didn't understand why people were behaving the way we were, and when we did try to show up in a certain way and people were responding to us in things that were confusing and we didn't understand. So when we observed other people's behaviors and they're like, oh, they're getting a positive response. If I respond in a certain way, if I show up in a certain way, I might get a positive response too. Makes sense.
Yeah.
But we're not being true to ourselves. We didn't get a chance to explore what felt right to us. Who are we? So,
it's like kind of coming back into the stream of, so we're talking about getting back in the body, practical things we can do, witchcraft, somatic work, because your inner child had to learn to adapt, which was masking, and that led to all of these other things. And I want to let you keep going with that stream of thought, but I have something I want to add about internal family systems when we come back to that stream.
Cool.
Just putting that little.
Although I wanted to come back to, I'm forgetting the term that you were explaining. You had led a podcast or a discussion on
the creating the council of self?
The creating the council of self. And I want to say that creativity was a part of that. So getting in touch with your creativity is one of those wonderful ways to engage with your body somatically. And then also, like, when your body is in a fight, flight, or freeze, fawn response, it's almost impossible to, I can't say it's impossible. It's really hard. It's very difficult to engage with your creativity, which is why regulating your nervous system, then engaging in something that is fulfilling like this is like a two-step process. So for neurodivergence, learning how to regulate your own nervous system, what calms you down, and then also what do you enjoy to fill your cup. So if creativity is one of those things, I used to really love to knit. So like knitting and making a gift for someone else is like a way of bringing enjoyment. Like what brings you joy? If going for a walk at the beach brings you joy, where do you find the joy in your life? And can you find those joyful moments? So those are, once again, it's free. Joy is free.
Joy is free. It's a renewable resource.
It's a renewable resource. So those are like practical things that you can engage in your body. And then while you're engaging and noticing those things that bring joy in your life, notice where you feel it in your body. Because like it's so easy to notice when you feel bad.
Oh, yeah.
It's noticed, and it's so easy to focus on when you feel bad that you've always felt bad and it will never go away. And part of mental health, the goal is not to never feel bad again. The goal is to move through those times of discomfort and to notice when you're feeling good, and then notice when you're feeling discomfort, and then notice when you're feeling good. We manage those waves. And that's what regulation is.
Yeah.
So we're not avoiding the bad parts of life, and we're not just trying to stay in like life is great all the time.
Yeah, we're not spiritually bypassing.
Nor but also
we catastrophizing
all the time.
Yeah.
Life happens, but life isn't always bad. Ironically, that's kind of the state we're living in currently.
No, I was psychically there with you. You know what's so funny is I'm like, oh, we got to get into the politics. We got to get into the state of the world.
We want to like pause our little somatic thing and make space for that now.
We're going to carve out. I think the neurodivergents that are watching this can track with us.
Are we tracking?
They're
like
used
we're
to
going a little everywhere.
We're dolphining. I think they call it dolphining, where you jump up.
Because I think it's a very relevant point to make that like our current political climate right now, depending on where you sit, honestly, I don't even care where you voted. I'm sure your nervous system is on high alert. I don't care who you voted for.
Anyone. All of us. We are all humans in this human experience, and belief is part of it.
And but for me, where I lay on it, two things really triggered me. And I have since watched the last week of the executive orders going out, its effect on communities, the LGBT community, the Jewish community, the migrant community, our local community just yesterday. And I guess I don't want to go into too much specifics because I fear about spreading misinformation.
Yeah, it's just more of like how it's hitting each of us as individuals, wherever we are on the spectrum of our beliefs or opinions. It's hitting all of us.
It's hitting all of us.
Triggering all of us and our ability to stay regulated.
And that's where like yesterday I hit a bit. I'm glad I noticed where I was hitting a wall and trying to balance my desire to stay informed, because I do have a sense of justice, like this need to notice when injustice is happening and wanting to not stay silent about it and do something about it, and the anxiety behind it. And then also knowing that I have a life in front of me, that life goes on. I have a life that I show up to. I have 2 small boys. I have, friends, I have responsibilities, and I have a nervous system that needs to be regulated so I can show up for it.
Yeah.
So at one point yesterday, I stopped my car. I drove to a park and I decided to meditate, and I noticed the feeling in my chest that had been there all day. But I decided to finally sit and honor it, because even to this day, I do what I've always done a lot for most of my life, is I ignore my feelings. And still, it's a practice to sit and honor my feelings. So I put on an instrumental that I really enjoy, and I sat and I meditated a bit and was able to hold my feeling of anxiety, and underneath my feeling of anxiety was helplessness. And that was really like when I was able to speak to my helplessness, then I was able to tell it, like, I see you, and I'm sorry that I feel like I can't do what I want to do with this, but I'll do what I can. And that's what I felt like my sense of self was more able to show up for that helpless part of me. And it was less reactionary than the anxiety was wanting to put out like a really angry post on Instagram or something.
yeah.
Because like in a bigger sense, in a bigger system sense, I would like to say that what we're seeing in the political sense is a projection of what maybe half of America is really feeling and believing at this point. If they did the inner work, I mean, they're projecting their fear and anxiety of Lord knows what work they need to do.
Yeah.
And for me, instead of projecting my fear and anxiety onto whatever is, I worked on my helplessness. And not saying I'm perfect or whatever, but that's what I discovered that yesterday. And I guess my hope and encouragement going through, this next 4 years is to continue to balance your desire to continue to stay informed, but also to notice that life is still happening and life is still beautiful around you. There are still sunsets to be had. There's still wonderful friends to engage with that are safe and supportive. Like we have our chosen community that give us life. And then also all people are human. Yeah. Even the people who are actively have a hard time seeing us.
Yeah.
And when I look at people and I try to see them through the lens of like, these are also humans.
We're all human
We're
beings.
all humans. And these are also people who are having experiences. I less have a reaction of like, oh, that,
So,
and it's there. I mean, it's there in me, but I less want to react from it.
right.
And maybe on some level, like I will honor that in me, but right now it's not as productive in my life.
That's the one that I've been trying to get to, and I think a lot of people hear my messaging around politics and they hear that I'm saying check out, and that's not at all what I'm saying. Just as you mentioned, there is still beauty and joy to be experienced. There are still sunsets. Whether or not you're aware of what's going on and whether or not you have something to say about it in order to be productive in spreading a message of what is going on, in participating in the conversation of what is going on. Is it more productive for you in your life and the people in your life to be rocking back and forth, typing angrily into a telephonic device, screaming into the void, which we do need to have conversations about these things.
Conversations, yeah.
We do need to be vocal. But is it more productive to be dysregulated and angrily typing into a phone, or to take a pause, take a breath, be in your body, enjoy the beauty around you while you have it?
Yeah.
And then think from a place of peace and be more strategic in how we participate and engage in these conversations and in using our voices. Because I don't think it serves anyone to be so dysregulated to the point of being outside of your own body and having your mind constantly living, your consciousness is living in chaos.
Yeah.
At least that's where I was. I don't want to project that onto other people. Having my consciousness constantly live in chaos, which contributed to being disembodied and being dissociated.
Yeah. No, I've worked too hard to come to this level of embodiment, to allow this political climate to take me out of it now.
Yeah.
I would encourage people to not put their head in the sand, but balance it with the enjoyment that their life still has to offer them. And that is part of mental health, in my opinion. That's cliche, self-care. And
you have to care.
You have to care
for yourself, because if you do not, who else will?
Who else will? No one else will. We can't, no one else is going to care for you more than yourself, honestly.
Yeah.
And I had to take a huge leap this last winter of like, if I don't take care of myself, then I can't take care of my boys effectively. I can't be a therapist effectively. It was just a huge paradigm shift for me in my head. But going into this political season, the next 4 years, it's going to be a marathon rather than a sprint. And I don't feel bad about being selfish about how I'm going to take care of myself during this time, especially as a woman, and how I use social media to either communicate or not communicate. I just won't have any shame about that. Just even having this conversation on the podcast is just my way of advocating. So that's just my small way of just having a voice. And I love that you've given me a platform to do that. So I really appreciate it.
I'm so excited that you're here, because I have so many private messages of people who don't have a place to go or a person to go to, seeking help, therapeutic help that I am not equipped to offer. I do my best to just meet them and be present.
Yeah.
And to share the things that have really helped me and to help them brainstorm. I'm like, look, I'm not a professional, but let's brainstorm.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you. And what I've been telling them is, I have someone coming. And while it's not meant to treat or diagnose or be taken as like professional advice, this is someone who has experience in these realms that you can come to for some information. And I hope that that's the right way of putting it. This is not meant to be therapy.
No, it's not.
But
it's just someone's experience and thoughts in the field. So,
but you being willing to come and share your thoughts and your feelings and your experiences.
So I guess if I could just more for the neurodivergents who like a bullet point
Yes.
on how to take care of yourself going into the next 4 years.
Yes.
While wanting to stay informed, but also stay sane. Continue self-care, continue to stay hydrated, eat, because while our nervous systems are going to be on high alert, we're not going to be listening to our signals as well as we could be otherwise. So that means we're not going to be listening to our hunger cues and our thirst cues as well as we might have been. So make sure we're drinking water to avoid headaches and overstimulation. Make sure we're eating regular good food, not just junk food or things that are just tasty that stimulate us.
Nutrition.
But also, like, if we find ourselves getting numbed out and dissociated, sour things that are spicy, things that are, good for, might be good to help get us back into our bodies. So using those, once again, sensory stuff, taste, smells. We used essential oils earlier today. So getting those. I like to brush the skin sometimes to help engage our nervous systems again. So brushing of the skin, flapping of the hands are just really good to just kind of wake ourselves up. So going for walks, making sure you get outside. Some of us work inside or don't get outside because we're tired. Yeah. If you find that you're exhausted a lot because of the stress that we're coming up because we care, neurodivergents tend to have a lot of empathy, and you're finding yourself exhausted, still get up and walk. Get yourself some air, and that would be really good for your nervous system.
And it doesn't have to be like a 5-mile walk. It could be a 5-minute walk.
Very gentle walk.
Yeah.
And for me, sometimes I can't even do a walk. I get in my car and I drive to the beach just to roll down my windows, smell the air. Yeah. Like, it's just to get outside.
And if you're not, it's kind of a double-edged sword living here by the coast, but if you're not by the coast, a park.
A park, anywhere there's fresh air.
Yeah.
Also, some neurodivergents need to isolate, but also, like, if you have a safe friend that is understanding, just make sure to just, like, send a touching base text, like, hey, I'm here, I'm going through a rough time. You don't have to write back, just touching base.
That's an important one I've been thinking about these last few days, because sometimes reaching out to people is hard when you're neurodivergent because you don't have the right words. I know I would put out little bids for connection that were like, I really need connection, but I didn't know how to verbalize exactly what I need.
Yeah.
And what I'm learning as I'm going, and even being on the other side of people putting out bids with connection and me not really understanding what that looks like from them.
Yeah.
Being so very clear and direct about like what it is that you are hoping, or not necessarily expecting, but what do you need?
Yeah.
What exactly do you need?
My neurodivergence in communication has been like very black and white, for better or worse, honestly. It's either and that's been just a practice for me. It's either I didn't communicate my needs or I over communicated, for better or worse. So now I have my core group of friends and they're very sweet and understanding, but for a while I would like just send out the text, or even before I knew I would kind of shut down. Can I in the future touch base with you if I'm having a rough time? And the text message will look like this. It'll look like a script. And that's sort of how I used to almost 10 years ago, how I started communicating to begin with, because I didn't know how to communicate. I was very much trapped in my head for a while. So I developed these scripts.
Relatable.
Yeah. I still use them. I still use certain phrases, and like when I'm awkward and I'm in group settings, I've developed these scripts and phrases that I use all the time, but now that I'm a little more comfortable in myself, that now it kind of flows a bit differently. So if you as a neurodivergent are still getting used to asking for what you need, or even trying to get curious about asking yourself what you need, finding a script that you can go to ask yourself and to ask a trusted friend, awkwardly practice, like, hey, can I practice this with you? And communicating with the right person, like if you try to communicate with the right person, it just doesn't, it won't go wrong. Like, meaning like if you're trying to open up and communicate with the right person, it's going to be received well. They're going to want to receive you, meaning.
Yeah.
They're going to want to get to know you.
True communication is the mutual desire to understand.
They're going to want to know and understand you. And that's hard for us neurodivergents, because we grew up being and feeling different.
Yeah.
And not
so
misunderstood. But we're now, as adults, hopefully we are surrounding ourselves with people who want to be around us, who want to be in our lives. And now,
maybe move the mic just a little closer. Perfect.
Yeah, who want to be around us. And now we have to develop trust.
Yeah.
And we get to practice that with them.
And it's not always going to be met exactly how we wish.
No, that's where we have to manage our expectations.
That's a part of, learning. There are some people who are not the people, and sometimes that comes with heartbreak, and you got to feel those feelings. But it is our job, like Melinda's been sharing, self-care. If we don't care for ourselves, who will? As a part of self-care, learning who those people are that we can surround ourselves with. The people who do wish to mutually understand.
Yeah.
And it will be made clear to you who those people are not.
Yes. And I'm glad you bring up that point too. And that neurodivergents feel very deeply. And that's also where we feel the rejection very deeply, and how we've also developed coping mechanisms to avoid it. So part of my journey too is just how I've developed ways of not feeling or avoiding certain relationships where I've avoided rejection and adapted myself. I conformed myself to other people so that I would be accepted and I would avoid this rejection, this feared rejection. And now when I risk allowing people into my life and then ask for support, I'm also risking rejection. And sometimes that happens. But that's the risk I take for allowing connection and safety. And the people who don't show up and the people who can't provide that, that's on them.
It's on them.
It's not about me. And it took forever for me to finally work that through. It took me having to feel the rejection and comfort myself in that rejection, reassuring myself, not me. It's not, it has nothing about me. Good job for trying, Melinda. Like, you put in the effort. They were not either not in the place, didn't want to. One of the phrases of like, if they wanted to, they would. But they didn't.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe they want to, but they can't.
They can't. They just, and once again, it's not your problem. It's not your fault. Like, it's not like anything on you. So.
And that's when I think I kept going around a mountain of shame over and over again because of my particular situation that I grew up in with being tasked. I don't want to go into specifics actually, but I had taken on the messaging that all other beings and their energy were my responsibility to manage.
Yeah.
And that crippled me
I bet.
in my adult life. And even up until recently, like it was summer of 2024, where I hit the wall of something has to change because these narratives that I'm living in and the energetic experience that I'm experiencing and the mental thought patterns and the trauma in my body, I've hit the crescendo of this is as much as this physical being can handle. And it was something deep within my subconscious. It wasn't even me making a choice. It was like, hit the brakes. We need to make some changes, which has led to this journey that I'm on that created this space.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I wanted to touch on, because I feel like we've pretty much we've discussed through and talked through in a very casual conversational way a lot of the things that we had set an intention to talk about prior to recording this. But the internal family systems that you're talking about, the book that you're referencing is...
Yes.
Do you have it with you?
I do have it with me. I have two different books that I've been working through. One is the No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz.
No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz.
So this one is kind of like his... he developed the theory in, I think, in 1980, but this is his book on... And he had developed the IFS Institute. And yeah, so that's kind of his thing. And then I've been going through this workbook, which is the Neurodivergence Skills Workbook for Autism and ADHD. And it's just been so helpful. So I would just offer this as a resource for any of your neurospicy individuals out there.
I haven't figured out how to link things in descriptions yet. I tried. So I'm going to just write the titles down there, and you can put those into the Google machine and let them find it for you.
Yeah.
But because of how my brain works and how I work in conceptualizing things, I wanted to share a little bit about what came to my mind of my coping mechanisms and strategies as you're talking about the internal parts. So we have the exile and the firefighter, and then what was the other one? The managers. So if I look back at even 6 months ago, 7 months ago, where I was at, I lived as firefighter the whole time.
Yeah.
Child self was nowhere to be found. Exile was exiled as far as one could be exiled.
That's common.
I would say that I had created this external projection of myself that was on autopilot, and I feel like I was maybe operating within 1 or 2% of my mind. And the child part of myself was just deep, deep, deep hidden within, being protected by someone who was in a... I would say my firefighter was an assassin. And the assassin was constantly perched above the rooftop where child me was inside, looking for any potential threat. And I could identify anything. And anything that approached the house, assassin would hop down and annihilate. And that would extend to potential or perceived threats, even if they had not yet manifested, even if it was just a shadow of something that looked like it could be a threat. And because of that, I became a very volatile person. I believed wholeheartedly in those moments that I was justified in my volatility and in my rage. And I have had so many people along the way who have put up with me, and they've just said over and over again, we don't understand why you're so angry. Why do you see the smallest little thing in someone and you just go at it and you just have to attack? And the reason I want to share that is because I am so genuinely the most like gentle, like hilarious, childish, delicate, imaginative person. I am not a volatile person, but because of how fragmented I was because of masking, I lived in the mentality of an assassin, and then it was just manager would come in to clean up the assassin's mess.
There you go. Yeah.
You know, and be like, there's another body. And I share that with, I know I say that all very quickly and lighthearted. I don't find use for shame, so I don't have shame, but I feel sorrow knowing that I have caused a lot of pain and hurt in other people. And in my own version of no bad parts, because I've kind of had to, I'm one of these people I have to learn on my own. For some reason, I have to create my own experience. And it's cool to see that there are these wonderful books written by people who actually know what they're talking about that come to similar conclusions and similar processes that I have come to on my own. Because I want the people who are here with us in this conversation to know that there is hope for you. If you think I'm a nice, happy, hopeful person, 6 months ago I was not. And in only 6 months, I've been able to go on this incredible journey of confidence that has not only opened up this world, but it feels like the whole universe as a resource for hope and healing. And this idea that futility and fear are not useful or helpful or real. At least that's where I'm at. Like, you might have a different clinical perspective. Because I believe that even with all of the things that are wreaking havoc on our nervous systems and wrecking our physical bodies, these external things that are happening in our world, these things that we feel unseen or unsafe because of the things that we see happening that are traumatizing and unfair. And I could go on and on and on, but we tend to sometimes feel like everything is futile when we get to that place. And a lot of that has to do with not even being able to manage our own experience and feeling helpless. And if what I can do and what we can do here in this space with all of these different conversations we have with beautiful humans coming from different perspectives with different experiences, the one thing I hope we can do is just inspire tiny little sparks of hope that lead people to not feeling helpless or hopeless, but giving a little bit of power to be cliche, to quote a wonderful human being, is being the change in the world we want to see.
Yes.
Because if we can be the change, that's one less futile cause, one less hopeless person, one less person just agreeing with the narratives we inherited.
I think that's so relevant to kind of the conversation that we made space for with the political climate also, is that in being the change we want to see is, and that's kind of where I also like embodying. I lived in myself really hating my brain, hating who I was, wishing I was more typical, more, I would say normal, for the longest time. And it came to an apex a couple years ago. And accepting who I am, and that I am soft and squishy and feeling, and that allows me to tap into this self, this source, this center, and that gives me a sense of strength and belonging and connection to others. And for us to continue to stay soft in a world that wants us to be hard.
Yeah.
I mean, what an act of resistance.
Yes.
You know?
Remain soft.
Remain soft.
Yeah.
See the beauty. I mean, if I could, I think I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
That can be our resistance.
Our resistance doesn't always have to look like fighting materially.
Mm-hmm.
Our resistance can look like remaining soft in a world that's determined to turn us into monsters of fear. And
our empathy is our resistance. The way we care for each other is our resistance. And I will continue to work on myself. I will continue to care and love for the people around me and show that care and love and show it in my actions and in my words and in the care packages I give when they're sick and in the music I send to people when I feel inspired to, and the hugs and kisses and songs I sing to my boys. And those are the ways I show that in my life. And I feel like the world is, especially in this climate and environment, asks us, you got to be hard, you got to look out for yourself, you got to I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, no, I beg to differ, because when I tried to do that, I literally almost imploded on myself.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to call this episode Empathy is Our Resistance.
Empathy is our resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
I love that too. Well, before we close, any final parting words, or is that the one?
I think that's it.
I think that's the one.
Yeah.
Well, vive la resistance.
There we go.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your care packages and all the forms in which they come.
Yeah. Chocolate.
And thank you to everyone who joined us for this conversation. We are grateful that you wish to share your time with us, and we just hope that in a world of chaos it can be a little bit of soothing balm, just as this friendship is to me.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful. Take what was helpful, and whatever was, fluff, just throw it aside. But I truly do. I truly do hope it was helpful to anyone out there. So, yeah. Yeah, take care.
Bye, everybody. Or as I like to say on TikTok, okay, bye.
Okay, bye.